Elara lived in a small town. It was the kind of place where everyone knew your name and, honestly, everyone knew your story. Elara's story was simple. She worked at the local library and she loved books. She was quiet and kind. But inside, a big dream was growing. A secret she kept close to her heart. She wanted to run the Boston Marathon. It was a race for heroes, for champions, and it just seemed so far away from her quiet life. Still, it was a whisper that grew louder every day. She saw pictures of it online and in magazines, the sea of runners, the cheering crowds, the blue and yellow finish line. It felt like magic. One evening at dinner she told her family. Her voice was small but steady. "I think I want to try to run the Boston Marathon," she said. There was a moment of silence. Her father looked at her over his glasses. "That's a very long race, honey," he said gently. Her brother, always the joker, laughed a little. "You, Elara? You get winded walking up the stairs." He didn't mean to be unkind, it was just true. Elara was not an athlete. She was the girl who always got picked last for sports in school, the one who preferred a good book to a game of tag. The idea seemed impossible to them. Her friends had a similar reaction. They were kind, but their words were filled with doubt. "Are you sure about this, Elara?" her best friend Maya asked. "It takes years of training, people get hurt." They saw her as the gentle librarian, the one who brought them tea and recommended good books. They couldn't picture her running for hours. They couldn't see the fire inside her. Their doubt was like a heavy blanket. It could have smothered her dream right then. But it didn't. It made the small flame inside her burn a little brighter. It made her want it even more. Elara knew they were right in a way. She wasn't a runner. She had never run more than a few feet to catch a bus. The dream was big and she was small, but she had seen something in the faces of the marathon runners. It wasn't just strength, it was courage. It was the look of someone who had faced a huge challenge and kept going. That was what she wanted. She wanted to know if she had that kind of courage inside her. The dream wasn't just about a race, it was about finding out who she could be. It was a quiet promise she made to herself. "I will try." The very next morning, Elara decided to start. Before the sun was up, she put on an old pair of sneakers. They were not running shoes, they were just shoes. She wore a simple t-shirt and old shorts. She stood at her front door. The street was quiet and dark. Her heart was beating fast, not from excitement but from fear. What if someone saw her? What would they think? She took a deep breath. She remembered the picture of the finish line. She took one step, then another. She started to jog. It was not graceful, it was clumsy. Her arms flopped at her sides. Her breathing was loud in the quiet morning. She decided to run to the end of her street and back. It didn't look very far. But after only a few houses, her lungs started to burn. A sharp pain stabbed her in the side. Her legs felt like they were made of heavy stone. Every step was a struggle. It felt like her body was fighting her, telling her to stop, screaming that this was a bad idea. She had to stop, bent over with her hands on her knees, gasping for air. The end of the street seemed a mile away. Doubt crept into her mind. Maybe her brother was right. Maybe this was foolish. But then she looked up. The sky was starting to turn a soft pink. The world was waking up. A bird started to sing in a nearby tree. It was a beautiful, peaceful moment. She thought about going back inside. She could make a cup of tea and read a book. That would be easy. That was the Elara everyone knew. But she also thought about her dream. She thought about what it would feel like to give up on the very first day. So she stood up straight. She took another deep breath. And she started walking. She walked the rest of the way to the end of the street. It was a small victory. When she got back to her house, she was exhausted. Her whole body ached. She felt more tired than she had ever felt in her life. But she also felt something else. A tiny spark of pride. She had done it. She had gone out and she had tried. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fast. But it was a start. She knew this was just the beginning. The road to Boston was thousands and thousands of steps long. She had only taken a few hundred, but she had taken them. And she knew with a certainty that surprised her that she would be out there again tomorrow morning. She would try again. Elara knew she couldn't do this alone. She went to the library, her place of comfort, but this time, she wasn't looking for novels. She went to the non-fiction section and found books about running for beginners. She learned about stretching. She learned about proper running form. She learned about how to breathe. It was like learning a new language, a language for her body. She read about training plans. They were broken down into small, manageable steps. Run for 1 minute, walk for 2 minutes, repeat. It seemed so simple, it seemed possible. It gave her a map for her journey. Her days started to follow a new rhythm. The alarm would ring while it was still dark outside. It was a struggle to leave her warm bed. Her body was often sore from the day before, but she would get up. She would put on her new running shoes. She had bought a real pair. They were bright and felt like clouds on her feet. She would do her stretches, just like the book said. Then she would step out into the quiet morning. She followed her plan. 1 minute of running, 2 minutes of walking. It was hard, but it was not impossible. Day by day, the 1 minute of running felt a little easier. Her family started to notice the change. They saw her dedication. Her brother stopped making jokes. Instead, one morning he left a bottle of water for her on the kitchen counter. Her mother started making her healthier breakfasts. "You need good fuel," she said with a smile. They still didn't fully understand her dream, but they saw her effort. They saw the determination in her eyes. Their support was quiet, but it was there. It was like a gentle wind at her back. It made the hard mornings a little less hard. It made her feel less alone on her solitary runs. Slowly her body began to adapt. The 1 minute of running became 2 minutes, then 5, then 10 minutes without stopping. She ran a full mile for the first time. She stopped and cried a little. They were tears of joy and relief. She was becoming a runner. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It was happening one sunrise at a time, one step at a time. The routine was her foundation. It was the thing she could count on. No matter how she felt, no matter the weather, she had her routine. It was her promise to herself, renewed every single morning. The journey was not a straight line of progress. There were many days filled with pain and frustration. One afternoon, a sharp shooting pain started in her shin. She had read about this, shin splints. The book said she needed to rest, but resting felt like failure. It felt like moving backward. For 3 days she couldn't run. She could only stretch and ice her leg. She sat by the window, watching the world go by. She felt impatient and angry. The doubt came back, whispering in her ear, "See? Your body can't handle this, you should just stop." It was a difficult test of her patience. Then there were the blisters. Big, painful bubbles on her heels and toes. They made every step an agony. She learned how to tape her feet. She tried different kinds of socks. It was a constant process of problem solving. It wasn't just about running, it was about learning to listen to her body, to understand its complaints, to take care of it. There were days her knees ached, days her muscles felt like they were on fire. Each new pain was a new challenge to overcome. It taught her that being strong wasn't about never feeling pain. It was about knowing how to deal with it and keep moving forward. The physical hurdles were tough, but the mental challenges were sometimes even harder. There were mornings when it was raining or cold. Her bed felt so warm and safe. The motivation was gone. All she wanted to do was sleep. On those days, getting out the door was the biggest victory. She would tell herself, "Just put on your shoes. That's all you have to do." Once her shoes were on, it was easier to take the next step, and the next. She learned that motivation is not always there. Sometimes you have to rely on discipline. You have to do it even when you don't want to. The biggest mental battle was with the voice of self-doubt. It was always there, waiting for a moment of weakness. "You're too slow," it would say. "Look at other runners, they are so much faster. You'll never be good enough to run Boston." She would see other runners glide by her looking effortless. She would feel clumsy and slow in comparison. It was easy to feel discouraged. It was easy to believe that voice. She had to learn to talk back to it, to say, "I am doing my best. I am getting stronger every day. My journey is my own." It was a constant internal conversation, a battle she had to win every single day. Elara discovered a powerful tool to help her fight these battles. It was something she read about in one of her books, visualization. The idea was simple. You create a detailed picture in your mind of your goal. You make it as real as possible. So, every day, before her run, she would close her eyes. She would take a few deep breaths, and she would transport herself to Boston. She wouldn't just think about the finish line, she would imagine everything. She would imagine the feeling of the cool spring air on her skin. She would imagine the sounds of thousands of shoes hitting the pavement. In her mind, she could hear the roar of the crowd, people shouting her name. "Go, Elara, go!" She could see the colorful signs they held. She could feel the energy of the city. She would picture herself running strong, her legs feeling light, her breathing steady. She would imagine running up the famous Heartbreak Hill. In her mind, she was not struggling. She was powerful. She was conquering the hill. She would see herself making the final turn onto Boylston Street. The finish line in the distance, a beautiful line of blue and yellow. It was so clear. It felt real. This mental picture became her secret weapon. On the days when her legs felt heavy, she would bring up the image. She would remember the feeling of running strong in her mind. It gave her a little boost of energy. On the days when her motivation was low, she would think about the cheering crowds. It reminded her why she was doing this. When the voice of doubt started to whisper, she would drown it out with the roar of the imaginary crowd. The picture in her mind was more powerful than the doubt. It was her why. It was the fuel for her fire. This practice did more than just motivate her, it built her confidence. By repeatedly seeing herself succeed in her mind, she started to believe it was possible. She was training her brain just as much as she was training her body. The finish line of the Boston Marathon was no longer just a far-off dream. It was a real place that she had already visited hundreds of times in her imagination. She knew what it looked like, she knew what it felt like. This powerful mental image pulled her forward. It made her get up in the dark. It made her push through the pain. It made her believe. After many months of training, Elara felt ready for a new challenge. Her town had an annual 5-kilometer race. It was just over 3 miles. A year ago, the thought of running 3 miles would have been terrifying. Now, it felt exciting. She signed up. She pinned the race number to her shirt. She felt like a real runner. Standing at the starting line with hundreds of other people was a new experience. She was nervous, but she was also proud. She was no longer the girl who couldn't run to the end of the street. She was one of them. She was part of this community. She didn't try to win the race. Her goal was just to finish. She ran at her own steady pace. She remembered her training. She controlled her breathing. She saw friends and neighbors on the side of the road. They were cheering for her. "Go, Elara!" they shouted. It wasn't an imaginary crowd this time. It was real. Their cheers gave her a huge lift. She smiled as she ran. She crossed the finish line. A volunteer placed a small medal around her neck. It wasn't a big, important medal, but to Elara, it felt like gold. It was proof of her progress. That first 5-kilometer race was a turning point. It gave her the confidence to try longer races. A few months later, she ran a 10-kilometer race. Then, the following year, she trained for and completed a half marathon. Each race was a stepping stone. Each finish line was a small victory that built upon the last. She was learning more and more about racing. She learned about pacing herself. She learned about drinking water at the aid stations. She learned about the incredible energy you can get from running with other people. She was no longer just training. She was competing. She was a runner. With each race, her dream of running Boston felt a little closer. It was no longer an impossible fantasy. It was becoming a concrete goal. She started studying the qualifying times for the Boston Marathon. She knew her age group. She knew the exact time she needed to beat in a full marathon. The number was fast. It was intimidating. It would require a huge leap in her performance. But now, she had a target. She had a number to aim for. The path was clear. It would be the hardest thing she had ever done. But her small victories had shown her that hard things were possible. To qualify for Boston, Elara needed to run a full marathon in under a specific time. She chose a race in a city a few hours away. It was a well-known course, flat and fast. This was her chance. She trained for a full year for this one day. Her life became a cycle of running, eating, and sleeping. Her long runs on the weekends stretched to 16, 18, then 20 miles. These runs were grueling. They took hours. They tested every part of her being. She had to fight through exhaustion, pain, and boredom. But she kept the Boston qualifying time in her mind. It was her mantra. The morning of the qualifying race was cold and tense. Elara stood in the starting corral, surrounded by thousands of other runners. Everyone here had a goal. The air was thick with nervous energy. She went through her mental checklist. She had eaten the right breakfast. Her shoes were tied perfectly. She had her visualization ready. When the starting gun fired, she felt a surge of adrenaline. The first few miles felt easy, too easy. She had to hold herself back. She knew she had to save her energy for the end. She focused on her pace, checking her watch constantly. The race was a long, lonely battle. After the half-marathon point, the real work began. Her legs started to feel heavy. A small, familiar pain began to ache in her hip. This was the moment of truth. This was where her mental training mattered most. The voice of doubt started to whisper, "You're slowing down. You're not going to make it." She fought back. She pictured the Boston finish line. She thought of all the mornings she got up in the dark. She thought of her family's quiet support. She couldn't give up now. She had come too far. She dug deep. The last 6 miles were the hardest of her life. Her body was screaming at her to stop. Every step was a monumental effort. It was no longer about running. It was about pure will. She focused on the back of the runner in front of her. Just keep up with them, she told herself. Then she focused on the next lamppost. Just make it to the lamppost. She broke the remaining distance into tiny, manageable pieces. As she turned the final corner, she could see the finish line clock. She did the math in her head. She was going to make it. A huge wave of emotion washed over her. She used her last bit of strength to sprint toward the finish. She crossed the line and collapsed into the arms of a volunteer, sobbing with exhaustion and joy. Months later, Elara stood at the starting line in Hopkinton, Massachusetts. She was wearing the official Boston Marathon singlet. It was real. This was not a dream. This was not a visualization. She was here. The energy was electric. It was bigger and louder than anything she had ever imagined. She was surrounded by runners from all over the world. Champions, charity runners, and ordinary people like her. People who had worked so hard just to be here. She felt a profound sense of belonging. She had earned her place. The quiet librarian from a small town was about to run the most famous marathon in the world. The race began. The first part of the course was a long, gentle downhill. The crowds were incredible. They were 10 people deep on both sides of the road. They cheered for everyone. They held up funny signs. They offered water and orange slices. Elara had planned to run her own race to stay focused, but she couldn't help but smile. The joy of the crowd was infectious. She high-fived little kids. She thanked the volunteers. This race wasn't just about a time on a clock. It was a celebration. It was a 26.2-mile-long party. She soaked in every moment. Around mile 20, she reached the infamous Newton Hills. The final and most difficult hill is called Heartbreak Hill. Her legs were heavy. Her energy was fading. This was the part of the race that broke so many runners. As she started the long, grinding climb, she felt her pace slow. The doubt she knew so well began to creep back in. But this time, something was different. The crowds were louder here than anywhere else. They knew this was the hardest part. They screamed with encouragement. "You can do it! You're stronger than the hill!" Their energy was a physical force. It lifted her up. She thought of her own journey. She had climbed so many hills to get here. This was just one more. After conquering Heartbreak Hill, the course was mostly downhill to the finish. She made the famous right turn onto Hereford Street and the left turn onto Boylston Street. And there it was, the blue and yellow finish line. It was exactly like the picture in her mind, but 1,000 times better. The roar of the crowd was a deafening, beautiful sound. She saw the faces of her family in the crowd. Her mom was crying, her dad was cheering, her brother was holding a sign that said, "My sister is my hero." Tears streamed down Elara's face. She wasn't an athlete, she was a marathoner. She raised her arms as she crossed the finish line. Someone placed a unicorn medal around her neck. It was heavy and beautiful. Her legs could barely hold her up. Every muscle in her body ached. She was completely empty, but her heart was full. She had done it. The dream that once seemed so impossible was now a reality. The journey that started with a few clumsy steps on a dark street had ended here, on the most famous finish line in running. It had taken years of work, thousands of miles, countless moments of pain and doubt. But in that moment, it was all worth it. The feeling was more powerful than she could have ever imagined. Her family found her in the crowded finishing area. They hugged her tightly. There were no more words of doubt. There was only pride and love in their eyes. "We are so proud of you," her father said, his voice thick with emotion. Her brother looked at her with a new respect. "You were amazing, Elara," he said. They finally understood. They saw the strength that had been inside her all along. The race had not just changed Elara, it had changed the way they saw her. It had shown them what she was capable of. It had shown them the power of a dream. Back in her small town, Elara was no longer just the quiet librarian. She was the woman who ran the Boston Marathon. People would stop her in the street to congratulate her. Young people would ask her for advice about running. She had become an inspiration, without ever meaning to be. She showed them that you don't have to be a natural athlete to achieve something great. You just have to be willing to start. You have to be willing to work hard, even when it's not easy. You have to be willing to believe in yourself, even when others don't. Elara's story is a simple one. It's a story about a girl with a big dream. But it's also a lesson for all of us. It teaches us that our biggest goals are not impossible. They are just a series of small steps, taken one after another. They are built on a foundation of commitment and perseverance. The finish line of a marathon is a wonderful thing, But the real victory is in the journey. It's in the person you become along the way. Elara learned that she was stronger than she ever thought possible, and that is a lesson that will stay with her for the rest of her life. The finish line was not an ending. It was a new beginning.